There comes a moment when you stop waiting for them to come back, and you finally decide to come back to yourself. You realize that holding on to someone who already left, emotionally or physically, is like keeping a ghost alive in your heart. Every thought, every replayed memory, every what if, is another way of keeping them present in a space they no longer deserve. Deleting every feeling isn't about pretending it never happened. It's about reclaiming the parts of you that got lost while trying to love someone who couldn't meet you there. It's about accepting that some people don't deserve a permanent place in your story, no matter how much you once loved them. Because real healing doesn't come from closure or apologies or second chances. It comes from the quiet, brave decision to let go completely. This isn't about hate. It's not about revenge. It's about peace. It's about looking at the memories that once broke you and feeling nothing. That's the moment you know you've truly moved on, when his name doesn't sting, when the past doesn't pull, when the love that once consumed you has turned into calm acceptance. Because the strongest thing you'll ever do is delete every feeling for someone who couldn't love you the way you deserved and finally feel free. You can't heal what you keep feeding. That's the truth most people avoid because it requires discipline of the heart. Every time you revisit old messages, scroll through his social media, or wonder what he's doing now, you're feeding the very thing that's keeping you stuck. Healing doesn't happen just because time passes. Healing happens when you stop giving energy to what hurt you. When you stop replaying the same story over and over in your mind, searching for new meaning in something that was never meant to last. It's not that you don't deserve answers. It's that you deserve peace more than you deserve understanding. When someone leaves, they take more than their presence. They take the rhythm your days once had, the messages, the calls, the plans, all those small daily rituals that made you feel connected suddenly stop. And your brain, wired for attachment, panics. It wants to keep those emotional circuits alive, so you check your phone again. You scroll through photos, you look for signs that he's thinking about you too, but all that does is keep your pain on life support. You think you're coping, but really, you're maintaining a connection to what broke you. There's a reason it's called deleting every feeling. Because just like a file on your phone, that emotional connection has data, the memories, the emotions, the hope. And as long as you keep opening it, revisiting it, replaying it, it never fully goes away. Deleting those feelings doesn't mean denying that they existed. It means acknowledging that they no longer serve you. It means saying, I felt it, I learned from it, and now I release it. Because the more you feed a wound with thoughts of the one who caused it, the more it festers. But the moment you stop feeding it, truly stop, it begins to close. The hardest part of detachment isn't removing them from your life. It's removing the version of you that existed with them. That version of you who kept hoping he'd change, who believed if you just loved harder, he'd finally see your worth. That's the version you have to grieve, not him, but her. The one who believed he was the one. That's where real healing begins. When you stop focusing on how much you miss him and start asking, why did I ignore the moments I felt unseen? When you stop replaying his words and start remembering how you felt after hearing them, that's when the focus shifts from him to you. From the story to the lesson, and here's what most people miss. When you stop feeding that emotional attachment, it doesn't mean the love wasn't real. It just means the love doesn't have control anymore. You can honor what you felt without clinging to what's gone. You can remember without reliving. You can care without craving. Because healing doesn't mean you forget them. It means you remember them without pain. Every time you choose not to check his updates, you're teaching your brain to detach. Every time you stop yourself from sending that late night text, you're teaching your heart that it can survive without him. That's what strength looks like, quiet choices that no one sees. You're starving the wound so it can finally close. And one day, without even realizing it, you'll wake up and realize you haven't thought about him in days. The memory will still exist, but it won't sting anymore because you finally stopped feeding what was keeping you broken and started nourishing what was meant to grow you. His absence feels like a loss at first. You wake up and reach for your phone, half expecting to see his name. You walk through your day with that quiet ache in your chest, the kind that comes from someone who used to fill the spaces in between your thoughts. It's natural to miss him, to feel like something's been taken from you. But what if you didn't lose anything at all? What if instead life just removed what was blocking your peace, because his absence isn't your punishment, it's your reset? It's the universe saying, you've learned enough here, it's time to remember who you were before this. When someone takes up too much emotional space, you start to shrink without even noticing it. You start compromising pieces of yourself to keep the connection alive. You bend, you adapt, you minimize your needs just to maintain harmony. And in that process, you forget your own rhythm. You forget what it feels like to laugh without walking on eggshells, to feel calm without waiting for his next text, to feel loved without anxiety attached. That's what his absence gives you: space to breathe again, space to remember what it feels like to just be you, without the constant emotional weight of trying to be enough for someone else. It's not easy, of course. When someone walks away, it leaves behind silence, a kind of silence that's almost too loud. But silence isn't emptiness, it's clarity. In that silence, you start hearing yourself again. You start noticing the things that had gone quiet while you were so focused on him, your dreams, your energy, your intuition. You start realizing that what you thought was love was often anxiety dressed up as effort, and what you called connection was sometimes you carrying both sides of the relationship. His absence exposes the imbalance you once normalized, and that realization hurts, but it's also what sets you free. At first, you'll resist the reset. You'll try to fill the void. You'll scroll, distract, overthink, anything to not feel the loss. But at some point, you'll get tired of fighting reality, tired of wondering why he couldn't love you the way you loved him. And that's when surrender happens. You stop resisting the emptiness, and you start seeing it for what it really is: a clean slate. The beginning of something new, the chance to rebuild your sense of self, this time without needing someone else to validate it. You start to shift your questions. Instead of why did he leave, you start asking, what am I meant to learn from this? Instead of what did I do wrong? You ask, what can I do differently for myself? That's when his absence turns into your awakening, because every moment you spend not chasing what left is energy redirected toward what's next. You begin to discover how powerful it feels to meet your own needs, to soothe your own heart, to build your own happiness. You stop waiting for love to return in the form it left and start realizing that love never actually left. It just needed to be rerouted back to you. And one day, you'll look back and realize that his absence didn't break you, it built you. It made you stronger, softer, wiser. It forced you to learn what peace actually feels like. You'll see that losing him wasn't a loss. It was the moment you got your life back. Because when someone leaves, they take the version of you that was tied to them. But what remains is pure, the real you, the whole you, the you that finally remembers she never needed him to begin with. His absence wasn't the ending, it was the reset that set you free. Closure is one of the most misunderstood parts of healing. We think it's something the other person gives us, a final conversation, an explanation, a confession that makes everything make sense. But the truth is, most of the time, you don't get that moment. You don't get the apology you deserved, or the understanding you hoped for. Sometimes they leave you with silence instead of answers, distance instead of honesty, and that's when you realize that closure isn't something you wait for. It's something you create. You can spend months, even years, waiting for that perfect conversation that'll finally bring peace. But it never comes the way you imagine. Even if he did come back to talk, would it really fix the hole he left? Probably not, because what you're craving isn't his words, it's validation. You want to know that what you felt mattered, that the time you gave wasn't wasted, that the love you offered was real to him too. But waiting for him to confirm, that keeps your power tied to his willingness to give it, and that's no way to heal. Closure happens when you stop needing him to explain the pain he caused. It's when you look at the situation and say, I don't need your permission to move on. Because truthfully, his silence is an answer, his inconsistency is clarity. It tells you everything you need to know, that he wasn't willing or capable of meeting you where you were. That's not something you chase after, that's something you accept. Acceptance doesn't mean you're okay with what happened. It just means you've stopped fighting it, you've stopped asking why, and started saying even if I never get the answers, I'll still find peace. Even if he never says sorry, I'll still forgive, not for him, but for me. Creating closure is an act of self-respect. It's choosing to end the story in your own way. It's closing the door, not because you got what you wanted from him, but because you finally see he has nothing more to give. It's about taking control of your narrative again. Because the truth is, the story isn't about him anymore. It's about your healing, your growth, and your ability to walk away from something that wasn't good for your soul. You stop chasing clarity from someone who thrives on confusion, and you start giving yourself the peace they couldn't provide. There's power in saying, I'll never know exactly why he did what he did, and that's okay. That's when you reclaim your energy. That's when you stop checking his messages, stop wondering if he misses you, stop rehearsing what you'd say if he came back. Because the moment you realize you don't need that closure from him is the same moment you actually get it. You've taken the power out of his hands and placed it back where it belongs, in yours. And when you do that, something shifts. You stop romanticizing the potential and start seeing the truth. You stop needing him to admit he hurt you, because your peace is no longer dependent on his awareness. You close the chapter not because it's perfect, but because you're ready to turn the page. You don't need a period to end the story. Sometimes the sentence just stops, and that's enough. So you delete the messages, stop replaying the last conversation, and let the silence speak. That's not weakness. That's strength, that's self-love, because closure doesn't come when they explain themselves. It comes when you decide you're done explaining to yourself why you should hold on. And in that decision, you finally make room for something far greater: peace, freedom, and a love that won't make you beg for understanding ever again. When a relationship ends, it's easy to make the mistake of keeping him at the center of your story. You replay everything that happened, you analyze every word. You wonder how someone who once made you feel so seen could suddenly treat you like a stranger. Your mind builds your healing around him, what he did, why he did it, whether he's thinking about you now. But the truth is, every time you make him the focus of your pain, you give him the power to define your healing. And that's the cycle you have to break, because the story of your life doesn't belong to him anymore. It belongs to you. Rewriting the story means shifting the spotlight from him to yourself. It's about realizing that what happened to you doesn't have to define you. How you respond to it does. You're not the woman who was left behind. You're the woman who survived being forgotten. You're the woman who gave her heart fully, even to someone who didn't know how to hold it. That's not weakness. That's strength disguised as vulnerability. And when you start seeing yourself that way, everything changes. You stop seeing the ending as proof of your unworthiness, and start seeing it as evidence of your courage to love, even when love failed you. You get to rewrite the narrative. Instead of "he broke me," it becomes "I healed myself." Instead of "he walked away," it becomes "I learned to stand alone." You start understanding that the story isn't about losing love. It's about finding your own power. The moment you stop viewing him as the one who got away and start seeing yourself as the one who walked forward, you reclaim your strength. Because every time you define your healing by what he did, you stay stuck in his shadow. But when you define it by how you rose, you step into your light. Rewriting the story doesn't mean pretending it didn't hurt. It means acknowledging the pain without letting it become your identity. You can honor what you went through without living in it. You can remember him without letting him own your narrative. Every heartbreak gives you two options. You can become bitter, or you can become wiser. The difference lies in where you place your focus. If you keep centering him, the pain repeats. If you center yourself, the healing begins. Start small. Replace thoughts like "I miss him" with "I miss the version of me that loved fearlessly." Because that's the truth. What you really miss isn't him, it's how you felt when you believed in love. And that part of you still exists. You don't need him to feel that way again. You just need to trust that love doesn't end when someone leaves. It only changes direction, and sometimes it has to return home before it can move forward. You were never just a chapter in his story. He was a lesson in yours, a reminder of what love should and shouldn't feel like, of what you'll never accept again. You don't rewrite the story to erase him, you rewrite it to reclaim yourself. To remind your heart that you are not defined by who didn't choose you, but by how you choose yourself after they're gone. Because the real power isn't in how he remembers you, it's in how you remember yourself, and one day you'll look back and realize that the story was never about him leaving. It was about you finding your way back to your confidence, your peace, your strength. That's the moment you become the main character again, the one who stopped waiting to be chosen and started choosing herself. And when you finally see that, his presence in your story will shrink to what it always was, just a single chapter in a much bigger, much more beautiful book that's still being written by you. It's tempting to think that the way to move on is to suppress what you feel, to numb it, to distract yourself, to convince yourself that you're fine when you're not. But true healing doesn't come from pretending the pain isn't there. It comes from facing it, feeling it, and then letting it go. You can't delete what you refuse to acknowledge. You have to allow yourself to grieve the love, the memories, the future you imagined. Feel it once fully, honestly, and then decide that it no longer gets to live in you rent-free. That's the real process of letting go. When someone you love leaves, the emotions come in waves. One moment you feel angry, the next you're nostalgic, and then you're just empty. That's normal. Healing isn't linear, it's layered. But the mistake most people make is staying stuck in those emotions for too long. They keep revisiting the pain, replaying the arguments, reliving the betrayal. They think they're processing, but they're actually reopening wounds that were starting to close. The mind loves to analyze the past, but the heart can only heal in the present. The more you revisit what hurt you, the more power you give it. The goal isn't to feel nothing, it's to feel it once with depth, and then release it so it can't control you anymore. Allowing yourself to feel the pain isn't weakness, it's strength. It means you're brave enough to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. You cry, you scream, you write it out, you talk about it, and then you decide you've carried it long enough. That's the moment the healing starts, because emotions are meant to move through you, not live in you. When you hold on to them, they become heavy. When you feel them and let them pass, they lose their grip. You stop being the prisoner of your own story and start becoming the author of your next chapter. You don't heal by pretending it didn't hurt. You heal by admitting that it did and still choosing peace anyway. You can love someone deeply and still recognize that the story is over. You can miss someone and still understand that they weren't meant to stay. That duality, loving but letting go, is the hardest part, but it's also where freedom lives. When you let yourself feel once, truly feel, you release the emotional charge tied to that memory. You take away its ability to trigger you. You stop reacting to the past because you've already honored it. It's like burning a letter. You read it one last time, let every word sink in, then set it on fire and watch the smoke rise. That's closure. That's what happens when you allow the emotion to surface and then set it free. Because holding on doesn't protect you, it only prolongs your suffering. You think you're keeping a connection, but really, you're just keeping the wound alive. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring, it means you stop bleeding. The moment you feel it and release it, you make space for something new, new energy, new peace, new beginnings. You create room for happiness that isn't haunted by what hurt you. One day, you'll think about him and feel nothing. Not bitterness, not sadness, just neutrality. That's when you'll know you've deleted every feeling that kept you tied to him. Because the goal was never to erase the memory, but to erase its power over you, you're not meant to carry pain forever. You're meant to feel it, learn from it, and then let it go. The love you gave wasn't wasted, it just taught you how deeply you can feel. And the next time you love, it'll come from a healed heart, not a hurting one. That's the difference between surviving and growing. And that's what happens when you finally let the emotion pass through you instead of living inside it. You stop being a victim of what happened and become the creator of what comes next. Deleting every feeling doesn't mean you erase your capacity to love. It means you learn how to love in a way that doesn't destroy you. The real beauty in moving on isn't in pretending it never happened, but in realizing that you survived something that once had the power to break you. When you finally delete him from your emotional system, you discover something incredible. Your strength was never dependent on his presence. It was always yours, you just forgot it while trying to love him. Healing, at its core, is remembering who you were before you gave so much of yourself away. The moment you stop chasing closure, stop trying to make him see what he lost, and stop wishing he'd come back, you begin to rise again. Because all that energy you once gave to him now comes back to you, you start to notice how peaceful your life feels without the emotional chaos. You laugh again, not the forced laughter that hides pain, but the real kind that comes from a heart that's slowly finding its rhythm again. You realize that healing isn't loud, it's quiet. It's in the moments when you wake up and don't think of him first, when you hear his name and it doesn't sting, when you stop scrolling through old pictures trying to feel something. It's subtle, but it's real. When you truly delete every feeling, you stop living in the story of us and start living in the story of you. You shift your focus from what I lost to what I'm gaining. You start investing that same energy into your own life, into your passions, your goals, your peace. You stop waiting for someone to make you feel chosen and start choosing yourself every day. And here's the beautiful part, that energy is magnetic. When you stop chasing love from someone who couldn't value it, you attract people who do. You radiate calm confidence, not desperation. You glow differently when peace replaces pain. There's also a deep, quiet revenge in healing, not the kind where you wish them bad, but the kind where you genuinely stop caring. When he realizes that your world didn't fall apart without him, that you're thriving, smiling, unbothered, that's when karma does its work. Because nothing bruises an ego more than realizing he's been deleted from your heart like he never existed, and you're happier than ever. But by that point, you won't even care about his regret. His lessons will be his to carry, not yours. You'll be too busy living a life that feels light, full, and yours again. This process of deleting every feeling is really about coming home to yourself. It's about closing a chapter not because you hate the story, but because you outgrew it. It's the acceptance that some people were never meant to stay. They were only meant to wake you up to parts of yourself you had forgotten. The love you gave was real, but now it belongs to the past. The peace you're creating is what belongs to your future. When you delete him from your heart, you're not losing love, you're reclaiming it. You're taking that same depth of emotion and pouring it into your own growth. You're learning to love yourself in the way you always wished he would. You're becoming the person who doesn't need validation to feel worthy, who doesn't need attention to feel seen, who doesn't need anyone to complete them because they already feel whole. That's the ultimate healing, when you realize you no longer crave what once broke you. You no longer check your phone hoping for his name. You no longer measure your worth by his interest. You no longer let your past dictate your peace. You've deleted the emotional code that kept you tied to him, and now your heart is free to feel again, but this time only for people who truly deserve it. Because once you've learned to delete every feeling that doesn't serve you, you stop chasing love that drains you and start attracting love that heals you. That's when you know you've truly moved on. There comes a time when you stop fighting to forget him and simply realize you already have. Not because you forced yourself to, but because you grew past the version of you that needed him. Deleting every feeling isn't about erasing your past, it's about freeing your future. It's the quiet strength that comes from no longer needing closure, from no longer trying to prove your worth, from no longer waiting for someone who was never ready to love you right. You start to see the beauty in your own peace, the mornings that feel calm, the nights that no longer ache, the moments where your heart feels light again. That's what freedom feels like. You realize that healing doesn't mean you forget. It means you remember without pain. You look back not with bitterness, but with gratitude, because even though he didn't stay, he taught you to never lose yourself again. And maybe that's the most powerful kind of revenge there is, to rebuild yourself so beautifully that his absence feels irrelevant. To love yourself so deeply that no one's neglect can ever make you question your worth again. You don't need to prove anything. You've already won, because the moment you deleted every feeling for him, you made space for something far greater: peace, confidence, and a love that finally begins with you.